In this video, I will show you how to add custom tools to your AI agents using the Responses API. In the previous two videos, we had a look at adding built-in tools like the web search tool as well as a custom knowledge base using the file search tool. Now, there is one more built-in tool that we do want to have a look at, and that is the computer use tool, which we will cover in the next video. But sometimes you want to build your own custom tools which your agents will have access to. And that is what we'll cover in this video. Right now, I have this very basic boilerplate code that instantiates the OpenAI class. We then set up our initial input message, and we then call the Responses API, passing in our message. And if we had to run this file in the terminal, we should get this response back from our AI model. So let's have a look at setting up two tools. First, let's create a function that will retrieve to-do items. And secondly, we'll build a function that will retrieve the current weather using real-time data. So I'm just going to create this comment called tool functions. And let's create a new function called get underscore to-do list. Now I'm just going to stub this data. So we'll simply return a list of values. So for the first to-do, let's pass an ID of say 1, and with the title of buy bread. And then let's add a second to-do, and for this one I'll pass an ID of 2, and let's actually just let cursor auto-complete this. Now we will create a second tool which will retrieve the current weather in a minute, but let's have a look at adding this function as a tool to our agent. Let's create a new variable called tools, which is equal to a list, and here we can pass in all the tools that our agent should have access to. In order to use our function as a tool, we need to create this dictionary, and in here we have to specify a type property of function. Then we also have to give our tool a name, like getToDoList. Then let's also pass a description for the tool, and this will tell the AI model when to use this tool. Then we also have to specify this parameters property, which is a dictionary with the following properties. Now we could of course go and manually define this object, but there's a way cleaner way to do this. So instead of passing the dictionary like this, we'll actually use Pydantic to generate the schema for us. Now if you're new to Pydantic, it's a fantastic library for generating JSON schemas. So in the terminal, you can simply run pip install and Pydantic. Now I've already got it installed, so I'm not going to run it again. And after installing it, we can go to the top of the file and enter from Pydantic import base model. Now we can tell Pydantic how to generate the schema for us. So I'm just going to enter a comment called Pydantic schemas. And now let's create a schema for our to-do list. This schema is going to be super simple as we actually don't have any input properties. Let's type class. Then we can give it any name we want. I'll simply go with getToDoList params. And then the first thing we have to do is call model underscore config is equal to config dict. And here we can set extra equals for bit. Now we simply have to import config dict from Pydantic as well. And because our function does not include any parameters, we don't have to specify anything else in this class. So we can simply enter pass. Cool. Now all that's left is to create the schemas. So let's call this one to-do list schema, which is equal to get to-do list params dot model JSON schema. Now all we have to do is grab this generated schema and pass that into the parameters. Then finally, we only have to specify strict as true. Now we can pass this list of tools to our agent by going to the create method, and then let's pass in a new property called tools, which is equal to tools. Right, now let's have a look at the output. So I'm just going to print response.output, and let's run the script in the terminal. Now of course this is not very useful, as I've simply asked the agent how much wood would a woodchuck chuck. So let's rather ask it something about our to-do list, like what are my to-dos. Now if we run this again in the terminal, we can now see the response looks very different. We now get this object saying response function tool call, and we get this arguments property, we get this call ID, and we get the name of the function that should be called. The type of this object is also function call. This is the Responses API telling us that the action actually wants to call this tool with these arguments, and what we need to do programmatically is simply call our function and then pass the response back to the agent. So how can we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is call the Responses API in a loop. So we will keep calling the API until we get that final response from the agent. For example, we'll send a message to the agent. It will ask us to call a tool. We will then call our function, take the response, and pass it back to the agent. The agent might want to call additional tools or give us that final response. If it gives us that final response, we'll simply exit out of the loop. So let's say while true. I'll also indent this. I'll also indent the print statement. And then what we'll do is call the Responses API. Then we want to look at the output type to figure out if this is the final message or if we should call any additional tools. So let's store the output in a variable. I'll just call this response. Output is equal to response.output. And output is a list of results, so we'll simply grab the first result, and then let's also grab the response type, which we can get from response output.type. So first things first, if the type is of type message, then we want to exit out of the loop. So let's handle that case first. So if the response type is equal to message, then we simply want to print response.output text. This will give us the neatly formatted message provided by the API. Now, otherwise, if response.type is equal to function call, then we want to get the name of the function. So let's say function name is equal to response underscore output dot name. Then let's also grab the arguments that we need to pass to our function. So we can get this from response underscore output dot arguments. Now this object is actually returning the arguments as a string, so we just have to convert this into a dictionary. We can do this by creating a new variable called args, which is equal to JSON.loads, and then we can pass in arguments. We also have to import JSON, so at the top of the file, let's import JSON. So this will simply allow us to call our function and then dynamically pass in the arguments that were sent from the agent. Just so that we can debug this, I am going to print out some of these values. So let's say we'll pass in this f string, and we can say function is function name with args, and we'll pass in our arguments. If function name is equal to get to-do list, then we'll call to-dos, which is equal to our get to-do list function. And this is the function that we defined at the top of the code. So this function over here that simply returns a list. Right, I am going to just clean up the code a bit, as I noticed that I'm not breaking out of the loop if we print this message. So if the type is message, we will write the AI's response back to the console, but we also want to break out of the loop. Apologies for that, I should have added this back in that section. And if we don't have a final response, we will move on to this function call. And in the function call, we'll get the function name. We'll then call the specific function. And I'm actually going to store the results of our function calls in a variable called tool underscore result, which is simply an empty string initially. And I'm simply doing this because we could have multiple tools and we want to pass the result of the tools back to our agent. So instead of writing it to to-dos, I'm actually just going to pass the result to tool underscore result. Great, so when we create our getWeather function, we'll simply add the results to this tool result variable. Now, after our tool calls, we want to now grab the value that we received from the function call and append it to our list of input messages. So our input message was this list over here. So we want to simply append the tool result to this list and then pass it back to the AI agent. The agent will then have that context to answer the user's question. So let's type input underscore messages dot append. And the first thing we want to add is the response from the LLM, which we can simply get from response underscore output. So this is simply adding to the conversation history, right? Initially, we have the human message. Then our AI will respond saying it wants to call a tool. So all we're doing now is appending that AI response to our list of messages. And then finally, we want to append the result from our tool call. So we can do that by typing input underscore messages dot append. And now we can pass in a dictionary with the following properties. First, let's define the type as function underscore call underscore output. Then we have to pass in the call ID, which we can get from response underscore output dot call ID. So remember, what will happen is the agent will tell us it wants to call a tool, and it also gives us a unique ID for that request. And all we're doing here is saying that this result, this function output, is related to that specific call ID. So that's how the agent is able to tie all of these things together. And finally, let's pass the result from the tool call. So we have to specify a property called output, which is equal to the tool result, which will parse into a string value. Remember, these tools could return arrays, it could be dictionaries, etc. So we're simply squashing this down into a string. And that should actually be it. Let's run this in the terminal. And now we're getting this print statement saying that we want to call this function with arguments this, and then the agent is responding with our to-dos. How awesome is that? Now this is a super simple example, so let's move on to something a little bit more complex. We'll now create a function that takes in parameters. So just below the get to-do list, let's create a new function, and let's call this get underscore weather, like so. This function takes in two arguments. We want the latitude and we want the longitude. Cool. Then we're actually not going to stub this value, and we will pass in real-time data. So let's do an API call by creating a variable called response, which is equal to requests.get. I'm not going to type out this whole thing, but you can find the source code in the description of this video, and you can simply copy that API from there, or simply pause the video if you want to type all of this out yourself. This is simply a free API endpoint that you can call to get the current weather. We also have to import requests, and I think you do have to install this package as well. So in the terminal, type pip install and requests. Then at the top of the file, let's import requests by typing import requests. Cool. So this API will use the latitude and longitude that the agent will pass to it, and it will return the current weather. So from this API response, we want to grab the JSON response by calling data equals response.json, and now let's return data, and from this response, we want to grab the current weather, and within this property, we want to grab temperature underscore 2m. Okay, if you would like to learn more about the type of data that this API returns, you can simply view its documentation. But this will simply try to give us the current weather as close as possible to this latitude and longitude. Right, now we have to generate the schema for this tool. So again, we'll use Pydantic. And let's create a new class called getWeatherParams, like so. And again, we have to specify model underscore config, and we'll set extra to forbid. And our function has two parameters. First is the latitude, which is of type float, and longitude that is of type float as well. And Cursor's also gone ahead and created this weather schema variable, which simply calls getWeatherParams, which we just created, .model.json schema. Now let's create our tool as well. So in our tools list, let's create a new dictionary. The type will be function, and the name is getWeather. Let's also set a description of get the weather for a given latitude and longitude. And for the parameters, we'll simply pass in weather schema, and we'll set strict to true. Then we have to cater for that function call. So If response type is function call, we'll say that if function name equals getWeather, then we'll set tool result equal to getWeather, and we'll use the arguments that were passed by the agent to get the latitude and the longitude. And that should be everything we have to do for our code. So now let's change our question to something like, what is the current weather in Cape Town? Now let's run this in the terminal and hopefully everything will work out fine. We can see the AI correctly identified to call the getWeather function, and these are the arguments that were returned from our AI agent. And then our function was called and our agent responds with, the current temperature in Cape Town is approximately 19.4 degrees Celsius. Now let's see if we're able to call both tools in one prompt. So let's say, what is the current weather in Cape Town? Also, what are my to-dos? Let's run this in the terminal. And looking at the response, we can see that both functions were indeed called. So the agent figured out to call the getWeather tool, passing these parameters. Then it called the getToDo list with these arguments. And then it gave us the complete answer by giving us both the weather and our to-dos. How awesome is that? So if you wanted to, you could also assign the web search tool and your custom knowledge base to this agent to give it access to a custom knowledge base and real-time data. If you like this video, then consider hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel. In the next video, we'll have a look at giving our agent full control over our web browser using the computer use tool. I'll see you then.